began with words so sharp, they sliced through the air, like glass shattering on a quiet Christmas Eve. The greatest gift you could give us this holiday is if you disappeared from our family. 7 words, spoken by my daughter-in-law, and they carried more weight than a lifetime of whispers. Christmas shock. Those 2 words replayed in my mind like a cruel refrain, burning themselves into the memory of a season that was supposed to celebrate warmth and togetherness. I stood frozen, realizing that sometimes the people we bring closest hold the sharpest knives. And hidden in that silence was a detail so small, so buried, that one day it would turn everything upside down. They say silence kills marriages, but it also strangles families when left to fester. I had spent years swallowing my voice, hoping kindness would be enough to keep the peace. That night, however, the silence ended. For the first time in my life, I looked at Amanda, the woman my son had chosen, and realized I had been feeding an ungrateful appetite that would never be satisfied. I wanted to scream, but my words lodged in my chest, waiting for the right moment to break free. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted ham, but the sweetness in the air only made the bitterness sharper. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner, its twinkling lights mocking the darkness between us. My son Daniel stood beside his fiancée, avoiding my gaze, his face taut with the tension of a man caught between blood and vows. When I had given them $87,000 to start their life together, I never imagined it would buy me a seat at the edge of exile. Amanda's smile was thin, plastic, the kind worn in photographs rather than in love. She was proud of what she had said, proud enough to let the words hang in the air like tinsel, glittering, but cutting. Daniel cleared his throat, but his silence was its own betrayal. No one came to my defense, not even the boy I had raised through nights of fever, heartbreak, and struggle. The gift they wanted most wasn't wrapped beneath the tree. It was my absence. Toinid and Robert, Chompe. His photograph rested on the mantel above the fireplace, smiling with a quiet strength that used to anchor me. Now, I felt untethered, drifting in a house I had helped to create, treated as if my very presence spoiled their celebration. And yet, within me, something stirred. Not brokenness, but the faintest click of a gear moving into place. I wanted to shout about all I had sacrificed, about the years of saving every penny, about how each choice I made was for Daniel's future. But exhaustion held me back. The act of defending myself felt like throwing pearls into the fire. They would only be trampled, burned, and forgotten. Instead, I whispered to the air, if disappearing is what you want, then maybe it's what you'll get. Amanda smirked, thinking she had won. Daniel sighed with relief, mistaking my quiet for surrender. But silence is not always defeat. Sometimes silence is the space before thunder. Every shirt tucked into my suitcase was a reminder. They had taken my love, my money, and my trust, but they would not take the last of my dignity. I paused by the window, watching the snow begin to fall, each flake carrying with it the promise of change. My reflection stared back, eyes no longer wet with grief, but lit with something fiercer. I lingered by Robert's photograph one more time. Don't worry, darling, I whispered. They may think I'm leaving empty-handed, but they have no idea what I'm really taking with me. His familiar smile seemed to shine brighter in the dim light, as if urging me forward. That night, I understood something vital. You can love your family, but love without respect is poison, and I was done drinking it. Christmas shock. That was how it began. 7 words, spoken in cruelty, that unraveled the last thread of my patience. But the story was only starting. What Amanda and Daniel didn't know was that by trying to erase me, they had awakened the part of me that would never again be silenced. And as I zipped my suitcase and closed the door behind me, I knew that one day soon, they would discover just how costly their request truly was. Daniel once said, with tears in his eyes, that I was the reason he could build a future with Amanda. Those words felt like a crown of honor at the time. I had given him $87,000, nearly every cent Robert and I had managed to save after decades of sacrifice. That money wasn't just numbers in an account, it was sweat from long nights, skipped vacations, and meals stretched thin so we could provide something better for our only child. Yet now, Amanda rolled her eyes when I reminded her of that contribution, dismissing it as just some money once. I walked through the very kitchen my sacrifice had built. The granite counters, the custom cabinets, the polished floors all whispered my name, though no one inside wanted to hear it. Amanda called it their house. Daniel repeated it like a mantra, forgetting entirely that without me, the mortgage company would have laughed in their faces. I had offered not as a gift of pity, but as an act of love. Now that act was being trampled beneath Amanda's designer shoes. Amanda leaned back in her chair, inspecting her nails with the air of a queen addressing a servant. You can stay in a hotel, she said, or with your sisters, anywhere but here. The words stung worse than winter air against bare skin. Daniel cleared his throat, adding quietly, it's Amanda's house now. She manages the finances. His words landed like blows. The boy who once clung to my hand in thunderstorms now stood firmly in another woman's shadow. The irony was suffocating. They wanted me gone to preserve the illusion of independence, when in truth, every brick of this life was cemented with my sacrifice. I remembered Daniel's first job, how he had called me crying when his car broke down, and I paid the mechanic without hesitation. I remembered Amanda's panicked phone call about overdue bills, how I quietly settled them to avoid embarrassing her. Each memory burned hotter as I realized that what I considered unconditional love, they considered disposable convenience. In the guest room, the room I was never allowed to call mine, I folded my life into a single suitcase. The air smelled faintly of Amanda's perfume, clinging to the curtains she had chosen without ever asking my opinion. Downstairs, I heard their laughter as they toasted champagne, celebrating the decision to erase me. They did not even pause to wonder where I would go, or if I would be safe. That was when something deep inside me snapped into place. I stared at Robert's photograph again. His kind eyes seemed to ask if this was the life I had fought so hard to build for our son. I whispered into the quiet, "They think I'm nothing but a burden. They think I'm replaceable." But behind those words, a different voice stirred. One that whispered of papers I had once signed, of documents tucked safely away, of something Amanda had never bothered to finish. Amanda wanted me gone because she thought I had no more value left to give. Daniel agreed because he had learned to see me as a wallet instead of a mother. But the truth, hidden in plain sight, was that my presence carried more weight than either of them could bear to imagine. And soon, very soon, they would feel it. Looped curiosity settled in my chest like a secret flame. If they could dismiss my $87,000 as just money once, what would they say when they realized it wasn't just a gift at all? Would they still call me a burden when the house itself bore my name in ink they had forgotten? Because the cruelest twist in all of this wasn't Amanda's words or Daniel's betrayal. It was that the very thing they were trying to erase was the one thing that still held their world together. And when that truth surfaced, they would discover the cost of underestimating me. The night I left their house, I sat in the car with my suitcase in the back seat and my hands trembling against the steering wheel. Snow dusted the windshield like ash after a fire, and my heart pounded with a mix of grief and fury. It was then that I remembered Margaret, my lawyer, the only person besides Robert who had ever warned me to protect myself. I dialed her number, the glow of the phone screen casting a pale light across my face. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm but alert. "Dorothy, is everything all right?" I told her everything. The insult, the dismissal, Daniel's betrayal, Amanda's cruelty. My words tumbled out like water breaking through a dam. There was silence on the other end, the sound of keys clicking, and then Margaret's voice, steady as stone. "Dorothy, do you remember signing the additional documents 3 years ago? The ones I insisted on after you expressed concerns about Amanda's spending?" My breath caught. I hadn't thought about those papers in years. Margaret explained that the $87,000 had never been a gift. Legally, it was a loan. And more importantly, my name was still on the deed. I was a 35% co-owner of that house. The revelation hit me like thunder rolling across a stormy sky. For 3 years, Amanda had strutted through those hallways, convinced it was hers alone. Daniel had bowed to her, believing I had relinquished all claim. Yet in black ink and sealed signatures, the truth sat waiting. I owned a third of their so-called dream. My grief twisted into something sharper, resolve. Amanda thought she had banished me with a cruel sentence. She had no idea I could pull the very floor from beneath her feet. I asked Margaret what would happen if I wanted to sell my share. Her answer was deliberate. "As co-owner, you can force a sale. They'd have the first chance to buy you out. But if they can't, the house goes to market. You walk away with your share of the proceeds." I leaned back in the driver's seat, letting the words settle. 35% of $300,000 was more than a weapon. It was freedom. Freedom from being treated as a nuisance. Freedom from Amanda's contempt. Freedom from Daniel's blind loyalty to her. Through the window, I saw Amanda twirling in her wedding dress, her veil spilling across the living room as she laughed into her phone. Daniel popped a bottle of champagne, celebrating a life that my sacrifice had built. They were celebrating my absence. And yet, unbeknownst to them, their kingdom stood on foundations I could choose to crumble. My hand tightened around the steering wheel. They wanted me gone. Then I would disappear, but not before leaving an imprint they could never erase. Still, there was something bittersweet about the knowledge. Robert and I had dreamed of helping our son build stability, not ruin. But what had started as a foundation for family had turned into a fortress Amanda used to exile me. I whispered into the stillness, "If you think I'm powerless, you've forgotten who I am." For the first time in years, I felt the weight of control return to my hands. The irony was brutal. Amanda had refused to sign Margaret's acknowledgement papers, too busy chasing designer fittings and spa weekends. Her negligence had left the door wide open for me to reclaim what was mine. It wasn't planning. It wasn't trickery. It was protection, and that I had almost forgotten existed. And now it was my turn to use it. I closed my eyes and imagined the look on Amanda's face when she learned the truth, the rage twisting her smile, the panic flooding Daniel's eyes. The image alone warmed me more than the heater ever could. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was demanding respect. I wasn't destroying their future. I was reclaiming my dignity. But dignity, I realized, often comes with a price. As I pulled away from the curb and drove into the snowy night, Margaret's words echoed in my mind. "Dorothy, you own 35%. My lips curved into a smile that wasn't kind. Amanda thought I was leaving with nothing. She was about to learn that the woman she dismissed as a burden was the very reason she had a home at all. But this revelation was just the beginning. If ownership was mine on paper, how I chose to wield it would change everything. Would I sell my share, force them into a corner, and watch their fairy tale unravel? Or would I let them taste the fear of losing everything before deciding their fate? Either way, Amanda's reign as queen of the household was ending. And the cruelest part was that she had handed me the crown herself. Looped curiosity lingered like the glow of headlights in the rearview mirror. Amanda thought the worst thing I could do was walk away. But what would happen when she realized I could take the house with me? And when Daniel discovered the truth, would he see me as his mother again? Or as the executioner of the life he had built? The morning after I discovered the truth about my ownership, I stood in the quiet lobby of a small-town hotel, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee. Snowflakes spiraled outside the glass doors, covering the parking lot in white silence. My phone buzzed with messages from Daniel, half apologies, half commands, but I ignored them. Their words had stripped me of my place in their home. Now it was time to strip away the illusions that their wedding had been built upon. I dialed the number for Sunset Grove Country Club, where the grand reception was scheduled. The line clicked, and a bright voice greeted me. "Good morning. This is Jessica in catering. How can I help you? My throat tightened, but I pressed forward. This is Dorothy Blake, I said calmly. I need to cancel the wedding reception scheduled for tomorrow. Silence followed, then a stammer. Cancel? But the food has been prepared, the staff assigned, I cut her off gently. I understand the inconvenience. I will cover the cancellation fees, but the contract is in my name, paid with my credit card. I want it ended. Jessica hesitated, her professional tone faltering. Would you like me to speak with the bride and groom first? My lips curved into a thin smile. No need. They made it very clear I wasn't welcome. I'm simply honoring their wishes. With those words, I severed the last tie binding me to their celebration. It wasn't malice. It was math. Why should I fund a fairy tale when I had been cast as the villain? Later that evening, I settled into my hotel bed with a tray of room service and a glass of red wine. For the first time in months, I ate without Amanda's complaints filling the air. The satisfaction was quiet, almost dangerous. At nearly midnight, the phone rang. Amanda's voice screeched through the receiver, jagged with panic. What did you do? They called me. They said you canceled the reception. I muted the television and answered with measured calm. You told me to disappear. So I did, along with the reception I was paying for, $14,000 worth. Silence stretched across the line, broken only by Amanda's ragged breathing. 14,000, she whispered, as if the number itself were a betrayal. Daniel's voice came next, desperate. Mom, this is insane. 200 people are expecting dinner tomorrow. I sipped my wine. Then I suppose you'll need to find another way. I hear fast food chains cater now. Amanda's sobs echoed through the phone, the kind that once would have softened my heart. Now, they sounded like the tantrums of a spoiled child stripped of her toys. You're vindictive. You're cruel, she cried. My reply was even, unshaken. No, Amanda. Vindictive was asking me to vanish from my own family. This is responsibility. I'm no longer bankrolling people who treat me like an enemy. Daniel tried to salvage control, begging me to reverse the cancellation, but every word only deepened the chasm between us. We trusted you, he said finally, his voice breaking. I let the silence stretch before answering. You trusted my money, not me. The line went quiet, heavy with a truth they could no longer deny. That night, as the snow thickened outside my window, I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer the desperate mother clinging to a place in her son's life. I was the woman who held the purse strings, the contracts, the signatures, and I had chosen to cut them. The reception was gone, the illusion shattered. Tomorrow, Amanda would walk down the aisle, but the echo of empty tables and absent music would haunt her. And yet, even as I lay back on the crisp hotel sheets, one question lingered in the shadows. If canceling a wedding reception could bring them to their knees, what would they do when they learned I held the power to take their very home away? Would Daniel finally look at me, not as a burden, but as a force? Or would Amanda sharpen her knives for another strike? The morning after the ruined reception, I sat in the hotel restaurant with a plate of eggs gone cold in front of me. A quiet satisfaction hummed through my veins. Amanda and Daniel had wanted me gone, and I had honored their wish with surgical precision. Yet as I sipped my coffee, I knew the fight wasn't over. With people like them, it never was. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered, expecting another furious plea about the wedding. Instead, a calm male voice introduced himself. Mrs. Blake? This is Detective Rodriguez with the Virginia Beach Police Department. We've received a report concerning possible financial elder abuse in your household. My hand tightened around the cup, heat spilling over my fingers. Excuse me? He cleared his throat. We were told family members might be exploiting your finances and that you could be experiencing cognitive decline. We need to arrange a welfare check. The realization hit like ice water. Amanda and Daniel had made their next move. They had painted me not as a mother, protecting her dignity, but as a fragile old woman losing her mind. Fury burned through me, steady and clear. Detective, I said, my voice sharp. I am fully in control of my faculties. In fact, I've never been clearer. And I have documentation to prove exactly who has been exploiting whom. That night, I gathered years of bank statements, receipts, and transfers into a leather folder. The numbers told a story Amanda could not erase. $124,000 quietly funneled into their lives, under the guise of emergencies, kindness, and silent sacrifice. Each canceled check was a scar. Each online transfer was a wound. They thought they could erase me with lies, but the truth was written in ink across every page. The next morning, I walked into the police station, head held high, and laid the folder on Detective Rodriguez's desk. His eyes widened as he flipped through the evidence. This is substantial, he admitted. I leaned forward. They've been draining me for years, Detective. And when I finally stopped, they tried to brand me incompetent. That is the real abuse here. In the middle of my explanation, I played Amanda's voicemail from the night before. Her voice dripped through the speaker, venom masked as concern. Dorothy, this is insane behavior. Normal people don't destroy their family over hurt feelings. We're worried about you. Maybe you need to see someone. The detective looked up at me, his expression hardening. Mrs. Blake, it seems very clear that you know exactly what you're doing. I'll be closing this as unfounded. Relief washed over me, but beneath it, anger still simmered. Amanda and Daniel's willingness to twist the law into a weapon revealed just how far they were willing to go. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had tried to bury me under accusations I didn't deserve. Yet in their desperation, they had overlooked the truth. I wasn't alone. I had the law on my side now, and every document was a blade I could wield. As I left the station, I could almost hear Amanda's voice shrieking when she discovered her plan had failed. She thought she could shame me into silence. Instead, she had given me a platform, a chance to put every secret transaction into the light. If she wanted to play hardball, she would learn the cost of pushing a mother too far. Looped curiosity coiled in my chest. If Amanda could accuse me of abuse to protect her illusion, how would she react when I sat across from her at the negotiating table, holding the deed to her home in my hands? And more importantly, when Daniel saw the truth laid bare, whose side would he finally choose? Margaret's office smelled faintly of leather and old books, the kind of place where truth couldn't be softened by excuses. The heavy oak table gleamed under the light, and my folder of documents sat neatly before me. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my mind, but when the door opened and Daniel and Amanda stepped in, reality hit harder. Daniel's tuxedo shirt was wrinkled, his face haggard from sleepless nights. Amanda trailed behind him, her eyes swollen, her usual arrogance dulled, but not erased. They avoided my gaze as they sat opposite me. Margaret cleared her throat, her presence as steady as a gavel. "We're here to discuss the property in question," she began. She laid out the deed, the mortgage agreements, the signed loan papers. Amanda leaned forward, her voice cracking. "We didn't know. No one told us you owned part of the house." Margaret didn't flinch. "I sent you acknowledgement forms 3 times. You never signed them." Amanda tried to muster defiance, but her words fell weak. I was busy with the wedding. Daniel buried his face in his hands, whispering, "Oh God." For the first time, I saw him not as a son betraying me, but as a man cornered by his own choices. "Mom," he said softly, "what are you going to do?" I let the silence stretch before answering. "You have 2 options. 1, you buy out my 35% at market value. 2, we put the house on the market and divide the proceeds." The room seemed to shrink as the weight of my words pressed down on them. Amanda's face went pale. "Market value? Do you have any idea what that means for us?" I leaned back, folding my hands. "Yes, Amanda, I do. It means living within your means for the first time in your life." The sting landed, and she winced, her nails digging into her palm. Daniel tried to intervene, his voice cracking with desperation. "Mom, there has to be another way. We can work out a payment plan. Please, don't destroy everything." The irony tasted bitter. They had been ready to destroy me without a second thought. Now the possibility of losing their home filled them with panic. Margaret's voice cut through the tension. "Legally, Dorothy has every right to force a sale. She is offering you choices, not ultimatums." Amanda turned to me then, eyes wet, but still burning with resentment. "You'd really do this? To your own son?" Her words trembled like accusations, but I refused to bend. "No, Amanda, I'm doing this because I'm his mother. Because teaching him that actions have consequences is the last gift I can give him." The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel stared at the table, his hands clenched. Amanda's tears rolled unchecked, but I felt no pull to comfort her. For years, I had softened every blow, absorbed every slight. Today, I chose not to. For the first time in our broken dynamic, I held the power, and they knew it. The meeting ended with no agreement, only a 30-day deadline to decide. As I gathered my papers, Amanda's voice broke the quiet. "If we lose this house, it'll be your fault." I stopped at the door and turned back, meeting her glare with steel. "No, Amanda, if you lose this house, it will be because you couldn't respect the person who made it possible." Looped curiosity tightened like a knot in my chest. They had 30 days to choose. But what would desperation drive them to do? Would they humble themselves and buy me out? Or cling to pride and watch everything crumble? And when the final decision came, would Daniel see it as punishment or salvation? 2 weeks into the 30-day deadline, Margaret called to arrange another meeting. This time, Amanda and Daniel looked less like victors defending their castle and more like weary soldiers who had run out of ammunition. Amanda's makeup couldn't mask the puffiness around her eyes, and Daniel clutched a stack of papers as if numbers could shield him from truth. They laid out their household budget across the polished conference table, each page a confession of excess. Margaret flipped through the papers with a raised brow. $400 a month on restaurants, $300 on clothing, $200 on premium streaming services, and nearly $800 in credit card minimums. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "We both work long hours. Sometimes we're too tired to cook." I looked her straight in the eye. "You don't work, Amanda. And buying new dresses for parties you don't attend is not fatigue. It's indulgence." Her face flushed crimson, but she said nothing. The numbers told a brutal story. Their income was $8,000 a month, yet they spent $12,000. They had been floating on the current of my generosity, mistaking survival for stability. Daniel tried to justify the gaps. "With a home equity loan, we could pay down the cards and free up cash. But there are conditions. First, Amanda, you get a job within 60 days and keep it for at least 2 years. Second, you sell one of your cars and use the money to pay down debt. Third, you live within your income. No restaurants, no new debt, no excuses. For the next 24 months. Amanda's mouth fell open. "That's like prison." My reply was sharp. "No, Amanda. It's called accountability. Something you've avoided your entire adult life." Daniel looked torn, caught between his wife's wounded pride and the reality of losing their home. Margaret broke the silence, her voice professional but firm. "If you violate these terms, the full $105,000 becomes due immediately, and Dorothy has every right to force the sale." They stepped out into the hallway to whisper furiously, their muffled voices leaking through the wooden door. I sat quietly, my hands folded, watching Margaret jot notes with calm efficiency. When they returned, Daniel spoke, his voice hoarse. "We accept all of it." Amanda nodded, though her expression was that of a woman swallowing poison. The contracts were drawn, the conditions signed, the deal notarized. I watched Amanda's hand tremble as she scrawled her name, her signature less a flourish of pride and more a chain locking her to reality. For years, I had been their safety net. Now, I was their overseer, ensuring that every dollar spent was a step toward humility rather than entitlement. And yet, as I left Margaret's office, I couldn't help but wonder, would this discipline break them into better people? Or would resentment fester until it boiled over again? Could a contract enforce respect where gratitude had never taken root? Looped curiosity gnawed at me. They had accepted my terms. But acceptance is not transformation. Would Amanda truly honor her promise to work? Or would she find a new way to twist the rules? And what would happen to Daniel's loyalty when forced to choose between his wife's pride and his mother's conditions? The knock on my hotel room door came just as I was pouring myself a glass of wine. When I opened it, I found a woman I recognized, only faintly. Elegant, silver-haired, her posture as graceful as a woman who had spent her life at country clubs. She extended her hand. Dorothy Blake? I'm Barbara Hayes, Amanda's mother. My surprise must have shown because she smiled politely. May I come in? She carried herself with the practiced ease of someone used to navigating social storms. Once seated, she studied me with eyes that were clear, almost regretful. I heard what happened, she began softly, and I want to thank you. My brows furrowed. Thank me? For what? She leaned forward, her tone laced with sincerity. For showing my daughter who she really is. Her words settled heavily between us. Barbara explained how Amanda had been spoiled from birth. Every tantrum cushioned by her father's wallet. Every mistake erased before consequences could take root. When she totaled her first car, Richard hired the best lawyer and wiped the slate clean. When she failed her college classes, he donated to the university. Every wall she hit, we turned into a door. I see now what that's made of her. She sipped the wine I had poured, her hands steady. Amanda called me hysterical about your ownership of the house. She demanded I help buy you out. And for the first time in her life, I said no. Amanda no longer had her mother's unquestioning support, and Daniel, trapped between a wife learning humility and a mother reclaiming dignity, would soon feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. Looped curiosity gnawed at me once more. If Amanda's own mother had stepped back, refusing to save her, how long would it take before Amanda realized no cavalry was coming? Would the pressure force her into growth? Or into a spiral neither Daniel nor I could stop? 6 months passed like a slow-turning wheel, grinding Amanda and Daniel against the edges of discipline they had never known. The contract bound them tighter than vows, every dollar scrutinized, every indulgence trimmed away. Amanda, who once laughed at the idea of working, now clocked hours as a receptionist in a dentist's office. The glamour she had worn like a crown faded into simple blouses and tired smiles. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, something unexpected began to bloom. One evening my phone rang. Amanda's voice, softer than I had ever heard, filled the line. Dorothy, she said hesitantly. I got promoted, office manager. The words carried pride, tinged with disbelief, as though she had unearthed a part of herself she never knew existed. I smiled into the quiet. That's wonderful, Amanda. How do you feel? A pause, then a laugh, genuine and unguarded. Exhausted, but proud. I never realized how good it feels to stand on your own 2 feet. Her tone shifted, heavy with emotion. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the rushed words I gave at Margaret's office. I treated you like an ATM. I dismissed your love. Not dinner, I replied after a beat. Lunch. In public. Let's start with that. Her voice broke slightly, but she agreed. That night, I sat by my apartment window, watching the sun sink behind the senior community's garden. My neighbors laughed softly outside, planting spring flowers. Life had settled into something steady, even hopeful. Yet Amanda's invitation lingered like a half-open door. Could a relationship built on betrayal be rebuilt with bricks of humility? Or was I setting myself up for another collapse? The next day, Barbara's text lit up my phone. Heard about Amanda's promotion. Thank you for not giving up on her. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering before replying. Thank you for not bailing her out. Across the miles, 2 mothers who had once enabled were now united by a shared resolve. Sometimes the kindest love is the one that lets a child fall. But as I set the phone aside, an unease curled in my chest. Daniel had been quieter these past months, his resentment simmering beneath the surface. He had abided by the contract. Yes, but out of necessity, not conviction. And though Amanda had begun to change, I wondered, would Daniel follow her path, or would he cling to old wounds and drag her back? The thought haunted me as I prepared for that first lunch. Amanda had begun to grow. I had begun to heal. But what of Daniel, the son I had once sacrificed everything for? Could he bridge the gulf he had helped create, or was he already too far gone? That was the cliff where my heart trembled, the question without an answer. Amanda had taken her first step toward redemption, but the path ahead was narrow and treacherous. And one wrong step, from her or from Daniel, could shatter everything we had begun to rebuild. When I look back on those months, the story feels less like a battle lost or won, and more like a storm that forced us all to see what had been hidden. Amanda, once arrogant and entitled, had finally tasted the sting of consequences and the pride of her own labor. Daniel, though slower to admit his failings, began to understand that respect cannot be bought with silence or financed by someone else's sacrifice. And I, after years of giving until nothing remained, learned that love without boundaries is not love at all, but servitude. Sitting in my new apartment, surrounded by neighbors who valued me for my company rather than my checkbook, I discovered a peace I had not felt in years. The walking trail stretched outside my window, the pool shimmered in the morning light, and the community garden thrived with flowers tended by hands that asked nothing in return. For the first time since Robert's passing, I felt like more than a mother, more than a wallet. I felt like Dorothy again. Yet the lessons of those 6 months were etched deep. Money can build walls or bridges, but without gratitude, it becomes poison. Family can be sanctuary, but when poisoned by entitlement, it becomes prison. I had allowed myself to be caged by obligation, but breaking free did not destroy me. It set me alight. The fire of dignity burned brighter than the comfort of silence. Amanda's invitation to lunch still hangs in my memory. I accepted, carefully, with boundaries sharp as glass. For reconciliation is not surrender, it is a choice made with eyes open. If Amanda continues to grow, perhaps one day I will sit at their table again, not as a benefactor to be drained, but as family to be cherished. If not, I will walk away without regret, because now I know the difference between love that binds and chains that suffocate. There is still a question that lingers, unsettled like snow before a storm. Can Daniel, my only son, truly step out from the shadow of his wife's pride and his mother's sacrifice to stand as his own man? Or will he always cling to whoever makes life easier? That answer may never fully come, but I no longer live waiting for it. My life continues, strong and whole, with or without their acceptance. Sometimes, the most loving thing a mother can do is say no. Sometimes, the greatest gift you give your children is the chance to stand without your arms propping them up. And sometimes the most powerful word in the language of love is the smallest. Enough. So, to you listening now, I wonder, have you ever been pushed aside by the very people you sacrificed for? Have you given until you were empty, only to find yourself treated as disposable? If my story resonates, I invite you to share your own in the comments. Tell us what boundaries you've had to set, what sacrifices you've made, and how you've learned to protect your worth. If you believe that family must be built on respect, not entitlement, then let your voice be heard. Like this video, subscribe for more stories that reveal the lessons buried in family conflict, and share it with someone who may need to hear that they, too, are not alone, because family is not defined by who takes from you, but by who stands beside you when the storm breaks. And sometimes the only way to save yourself, and them, is to walk away until gratitude is learned, and love is rebuilt.